let's now move on to the promise, because when Neville talks about resurrection and Easter, he's talking about, yes, the individual manifestation and the resurrection of that, but he's also talking about your resurrection as God, knowing you're God, and fully moving back into that state, into the united body of love, which is eternal, and which is, God knowing it's God. Um, so you recently had a very interesting dream, and based on, we haven't done a ton of promise lectures on the stream yet, but I do intend to eventually make that the focus of the stream. You had a dream which I'm quite sure is a precursor to the four primary manifestations of the promise, and I think it's a definite indicator that you are going to receive the promise in your life, and maybe sooner than you expect. So, would you be willing to share that dream, and and
Sure.
how you've thought about it since, and all that?
Sure. So I think, before that, I want to mention that Neville frequently talked about his dreams and how these were his visions. And when I first started down this route, it never once occurred to me that I would end up having mystical dreams. And I have.
Well,
Some
yeah,
that
I went
very
through this. I went through the same thing where it's like, I literally just wanted, not like vain material things, but I wanted things in and of this world, and that was my primary desire. I didn't anticipate having like genuine visions while meditating and having mystical dreams beyond anything I'd ever experienced before. None of that was
yes.
what I anticipated when I first found Neville. And there was actually initially a lot of hesitation. Like, I didn't. I was like, I don't want to become this guy that's like reading the Bible. It's like, oh no, I am gonna do that, and it's like, yeah, now I am. Here I am doing it.
Yes, yes, yes. Yes, I absolutely can relate. Um, Particularly, over the time I've had dreams that also very closely resembled the dreams that Neville talked about, which has been surprising to me. But this most recent dream that I had not too long ago was just really surprising because I didn't anticipate it, just kind of came out of nowhere. And it's interesting to me because I will also mention that even dreams within the dream that feel like it should be scary, it's not. It's a wonderful, happy sensation. I felt a great deal of joy. But in my dream, I dreamt that I was 6 months pregnant. And I didn't understand this because I'm not married. And I'm just like, hold on, if I'm not married, how am I 6 months pregnant? In my dream, I was very pregnant. I went to the doctor, and the doctor said, "You are 6 months pregnant." And I was just like, "Who fathered this baby?" And I was just like, "Did I have a partner and not remember? Like, how did this happen to me? How am I pregnant?" And in my dream, I then launched an investigation as to who had fathered this baby. But sure enough, I could not find anyone, a single man, who had fathered this child that I was carrying. It didn't make any sense. And I was just like, I don't understand what's going on. How am I pregnant? And then out of nowhere, a booming voice comes from the sky, and the voice says, "You are self begotten." And I said, "I'm self begotten. That doesn't make any sense." And so I continue my investigation, but sure enough, I come to the conclusion in my investigation that no one had fathered this child that I was carrying. And I realized the voice is right. I was self impregnated. And I remember thinking to myself, how odd. I am self impregnated. I am self begotten. And I just knew it was true in my dream. I knew it was absolutely true, but it still just was kind of surprising and odd, but I knew it was true. And then I woke up. And so I realized, oh my goodness, this is very much a dream, a mystical dream, talking about how I am self begotten, I am self impregnated, I am both the messenger and the message.
Yeah, and so for anyone not familiar with Campbell, you're entering while we're about to wrap up. But I was going to say this dream relates to, for anyone who's not familiar with the promise, one of the visions of the promise is when you birth yourself out of your own skull. And then also there's a presentation of the baby, uh, your child, which Neville often will say is the symbolism, is the Isaac symbolism, because the child is laughing. And there are usually three witnesses to this birth. In the case of Neville, it was his three brothers who were there, and they're like, "How did Neville have a baby? This is Neville's baby. How did he have this baby?" Uh, so that you literally give birth to yourself, and then there's an additional child in that particular vision. And so that's why I think that this dream that you had is letting you know that that experience is going to come.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, for most people, the experience of those visions occurs in dream. However, they're going to be like way beyond any dream you've ever experienced before. Because I feel like I've had ones that maybe they're not as intense as the promise is going to be, but they are far and away so much more vivid than any other dream. What I've noticed on the ones that I most deeply can't forget, it's not even an issue of recalling them, it's I can't forget them. And the big indicator to me was, so I always know I'm dreaming. I'm one. It's pretty rare, but for most people, you don't know you're dreaming. I always know. I'm always aware that I'm in a dream. It's very rare I am not. In most of these, what I would label vision dreams, I didn't know I was dreaming. And that was the huge indicator that, this was a message that I needed to remember and take to heart. Um, do you have any other ones you want to share before we move on to the Easter topic?
So I think that is all I will share for now, but maybe and another time we can definitely go deeper into dreams.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, Neville makes it plain that dreams are direct communications from God. The only issue is most people are not great in interpreting the dreams. What I've found, though, is that when it's something that I need to know, it's very direct. The symbolism is something that I'm going to get immediately, or I'm going to be given the answer immediately, or it's already a plain fact to me. Like the, when it's something I really need to know, there's no room for mistaking what I was told, included in the dream. Most recently, the dream I had included the revelation that everything here is just bones and dust.
Yes.
Everything here is dead. It's just bones and dust, and you're animating it. Your mind is the animating force of the entire world, and that's why things can appear and disappear so rapidly if you want them to. If you move into that state where that's something you encounter. Actually, Campbell, I had a very interesting unintentional manifestation. And it's such a small thing, but I realized today. So I was watching Campbell's stream, and they were playing clips from their previous streams. And one of the backgrounds they use is the background I use on my YouTube. Like in
Mm-hmm.
in my browser, I have a plugin where you can change the background of all of YouTube. So I'm looking at this picture all the time. Sometimes like an embarrassing amount of time every day, like 6 to 8 hours a day, and yet I never realized that they use the same image in their background. And of course, that's a manifestation. That was an unconscious manifestation. That was just me taking this image, putting it one place into another place. And of course, we look at the logical explanation of, well, it's a striking image. They wanted to use it too. And it's like, no, no, no. There's, there's like demonstrably billions of images they could have picked. Uh, you know, and they picked this exact one that I look at all the time. I didn't send them that picture or anything. So, it's pretty interesting, pretty damn cool. And now
Yeah.
I know that's not a coincidence, right? I know that that's me projecting it.
Yes.
So, to wrap up, we're going to talk a little bit about Easter. So,
Mm.
how has your personal, I mean, we've gone over without doing the whole lecture how Neville views Easter. How has your personal interpretation and understanding of Easter changed since finding Neville's teachings and applying the law?
Well, I think everything has changed. Ultimately, really beginning with the crucifixion, right? I think Neville is was the first individual that I ever heard it speak of a glorious event as a crucifixion. I was raised Catholic, and it was definitely a very different perspective as to what the crucifixion and Easter and the raising of Christ was, and the external miracle um, that I previously viewed it as. But now understanding um, how much more in depth and intertwined it really is in regards to the promise which we articulated on, and how you are risen and everyone is risen as the one true God is astounding. I think going back and rereading the scriptures and rereading, the story of the crucifixion, it's one of the most incredibly beautiful things you can read because of the just abundance of love that was really poured into the scriptures when this was written. And I think now, as I look at it, it's a very different story coming from a very different place. And previously, and how the churches and corporations and also um, intertwined a lot of things that have nothing to do with the scripture itself or really the understanding of the teachings of the Bible, and that Christ lives in you. It's a very different perspective, and it's one that is substantially happier. And so much of the celebrations that happen this weekend are due to two things, right? This perspective that you are unworthy, a sinner, and salvation comes through the external Christ, which is not the case. Salvation is something you do for yourself, and you're able to do that and ultimately manifest and work towards that promise and that incredible promise of being lifted um, as God. Um, and so it is a completely different narrative and a completely different book. And the way that the churches now celebrate Easter is not a reflection of absolutely not what Neville teaches in the scripture. And he talked about this openly so often about how the churches just don't represent the truth of it, and how looking at the Bible as a historical document is so incredibly damaging um, to you as an individual and to those you love and to those in other areas that are perceived as separate or different or unworthy. And so looking at that and that bigger perspective and what the truth of the rising is and the promises and Easter is so much bigger than anything I could have anticipated. I think, looking at that old perspective at how there's only one world and people constantly fighting and a great deal of fear of scarcity, and none of that is true. It's all an illusion. And so for me, really, Easter is not something that is closely tethered um, to the truth of the Bible, the scriptures. To be honest with you, I think now when I look at it, I think the one holiday that I really see that is honest and truth to the scriptures is probably Ash Wednesday. Because everything in this world's ash, it's all external, it's all temporary. And from ash you came, from ash you will return. From dust you came, from dust you will return. And so I would urge you to take time not only to listen to Neville's lectures or like Legacy's lectures, but also take time to really read the Bible and find out which version you enjoy reading. Personally, for me, my favorite is the King James version. There's something very poetic about it. But I think the understanding um, that the um, the crucifixion is happening, that the rising of Christ is happening every single day, every single moment, is something you have to understand that is happening now, not something that happened over 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when people come to the law, as I said earlier, and this is my experience, you're interested in having in obtaining certain experiences, things, changes in self, whatever. Mostly exterior world changes. But as you test the law and see that it's true, well, then what the other and then start to have vision dreams and other strange experiences, you realize, well, what Neville's saying is true. And the big part of what he's saying is that the Bible is a reminder you left to yourself. It's a way to guide you through the pattern you set down for yourself that you are going to go through. And the Bible is your way of understanding that pattern. It's literally your own reminders to yourself. And so that's the thing where it's like, well, this is suddenly relevant. Where prior it had only been relevant in the terms of, I grew up in a religion and had people who thought they knew the Bible telling me what they thought about it. You right?
Mm-hmm.
But once you have this more personal understanding, like, oh no, it's your autobiography.
Yes.
This is the thing you left. This is your journal that you left to yourself so that you would understand what you're going through. Then it becomes relevant. And I think for someone who's new to the law, who's like, look, I ain't reading the Bible anytime soon. Fine. Like, I'm not trying to convince you to do that. You're completely fine just learning on your own how to apply the law successfully. Do that. Do it endlessly. Do it every day. Do it a million times a day. Don't stop. But you are going to come to a point. It is going to happen. And when it does come back to the stream, we'll still be here, where you are going to be interested in this other side of it. And I mean, as Neville says, there's going to come a point where that's your only interest. And
Yes.
once you're at that point, very few people are going to be able to understand the message or care. But that's okay because that's also part of the pattern. Um, I mean, it's just like it really is just what it is, and it's something you set in motion for yourself. You know, in the time before there was time, you set that pattern down for yourself to go through. So it's okay if you're in a state now where it's of no interest to you. That's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, I just know that me personally having this new understanding of it released any animosity I might have towards like oppressive religious figures that I encountered in the past. Because having this understanding of it is like, well, now I know it's about me, so how can I hold something against someone else if, they don't even know what they're talking about? Like
Yeah.
that's just the state they're in. And I can't blame them for that. They're going to go through the same pattern too. They just have to go through a lot more states before they get there, and that's totally fine. It's all
Mm-hmm.
been laid out. It's all been planned in advance. So let them be in the state they're in. If I want, I can pull them out, and more and more as you want to awaken Christ in you, you can do that. You can pull people out of any state you want to. I think the coolest part about what we're doing here is that we're openly talking about the law, and when other people see that, they'll begin to do it too. I mean, that's how it's all going to move in this direction, because like people just be like, yeah, I manifested that, like openly, like casually over a lunch, with someone who 2 weeks prior they thought knew nothing about manifesting, and they start talking to each other and they realize, oh, we both know that this is going on. We've both been doing this. Oh man, let's start manifesting some things together, and it's quite fun.
Yes. And, because it is the one true mind, what you desire desires you. So the manifestation goes both ways.
All right, so I said we were going to end at Easter, but right there you provoked something very interesting because